If you really want to understand how the modern world was built, from the actual roads and railways of North America to, well, the entire political makeup of our cities,
Yeah,
you have to look at this one story.
you really do. We're talking about the Irish diaspora.
Mm.
And the thing is, this massive global movement, it was born from just complete and utter catastrophe.
Right. So today we're going to get into the real story of why millions of people were forced to leave Ireland, what that brutal journey was actually like, and how they completely changed every country they landed in.
And it all starts with one event, the core catalyst, the Great Famine. It kicked off in 1845, and over just a few years, it killed around 1 million people.
1 million people
Yeah.
from starvation and disease. And that horror, that's what started this huge, huge exodus.
But to really get the famine, you have to understand how fragile things were in Ireland before it even hit. The potato blight was the trigger, but the real killer was the poverty that was already there.
And that all came down to a single crop, didn't it? This weird, mysterious blight just wiped out the potato harvest year after year.
Exactly. And for most of the population, the potato wasn't just food, it was. It was the only food. When that failed, there was literally nothing else.
But why was everyone so dependent on it?
Well, it's the social system. Landlords owned basically everything, and most people were just tenants. These is a system called rack renting.
Rack renting. What's that?
It means the landlord would just keep raising the rent to the highest possible level. So if you ever had a good year, made a little extra, boom, your rent goes up. It was designed to keep you from ever saving anything.
That you're trapped.
Completely trapped. Then you also have conifer, which is where they'd rent out tiny plots of land, just enough for a family to survive on, but at these insane rates. If you couldn't find cash to pay, and who had cash, you were evicted instantly.
Joe, even before the blight, you have families in tiny stone and mud cottages, just deep poverty everywhere. And there was no escape, right? No factories to go work in like in England.
Almost none. No real industrial development. Your only option was just backbreaking farm labor on land that wasn't even yours. And education was, well, it was a luxury most couldn't afford. Kids had to work.
So when the blight hits, it's the perfect storm.
It's an impossible choice. You either stay and face certain starvation, or you risk everything you have on a journey across the ocean.
And that journey, I mean, it's just terrifying to even think about. We're talking about the 1840s, crossing the Atlantic. That's 6 to 8 weeks on a wooden ship.
At least. It all depended on the weather and the conditions on board. I mean, they were just horrific.
They were packed in, weren't they? Like cargo.
Exactly. Shoulder to shoulder on the lowest decks, very little light, almost no fresh air. It was the perfect breeding ground for disease.
Which is how they got that awful nickname, coffin ships.
They were called that because so many people died on the voyage. Sometimes a third of the passengers on a single ship wouldn't make it.
From what, mainly? Starvation?
Malnutrition, yes. But the big killer was typhus fever. It just ripped through the crowded decks.
And you had to bring your own food for the whole trip.
You had to bring everything, usually just, oatmeal or some dried meat. But water. Water was the real problem. It was scarce. It got contaminated. Imagine weeks at sea, watching people get sick all around you, knowing there's no doctor, no medicine.
The people who survived that, they must have been fundamentally changed by the time they saw land. That shared trauma, that determination. It's, oh, wow.
But seeing land wasn't the end of it. Not by a long shot. You first had to get through these inspection and quarantine stations.
Okay, so for people heading to Canada, the big one was Gros Isle, right, near Quebec.
Yeah, it was the main gate for Canada. And during the famine years, doctors checked every single person for disease. It became this massive quarantine site and honestly a massive graveyard.
Now, in the U.S., everyone thinks of Ellis Island.
Right, and that's a really common misconception. Ellis Island didn't even open until 1892.
So way later.
Way later. In the 1840s and 50s, the gateway to New York was a place called Castle Garden, right at the tip of Manhattan.
And what happened there? Was it just a health check?
Health was part of it, for sure. But officials there were also recording names, asking if you had any money, if you know anyone in the city who could, help you out.
So that was the final hurdle.
The final confusing hurdle. Because even if you survived the voyage, if you looked too sick, they could send you to a quarantine hospital for weeks, maybe months. Only after you got through all that bureaucracy could you finally start your new life.
And once I got through, they're in cities like Boston or New York with nothing. Absolutely penniless. So work was the first and only priority.
Immediate survival. And the jobs they found were unbelievably tough. For the men, it was almost all heavy physical labor. They basically became the workforce that built industrial America.
You're talking about digging canals by hand,
Yeah.
laying the railroad tracks?
The big infrastructure projects, exactly. They laid thousands of miles of track across the East and Midwest. It was dangerous work, incredibly long hours for very, very low pay.
And what about the women?
Irish women went straight into the workforce, too. A huge number became domestic servants cooking and cleaning in the homes of wealthy families. Others found jobs in the new textile mills and factories, especially up in New England.
But it wasn't like they were welcomed with open arms. They faced a ton of prejudice.
Oh, absolutely. It was inescapable. You'd see signs in windows, "No Irish need apply." That was a real common thing. They were restricted to the jobs nobody else wanted.
The dirtiest and most dangerous ones.
Precisely. And here's the thing to analyze. Their labor was so essential because they were willing to take those jobs. They became the cheap foundational muscle that America's industrial boom was built on.
And it wasn't just America. A lot of people went to Great Britain, too.
A huge number, especially the cities like Liverpool and Glasgow. They faced similar problems there, but they were absolutely crucial in building the British railway system and working in the factories of the Victorian era. And all that hostility, that prejudice, it actually had an interesting effect. It forced the Irish community to turn inward and build these incredibly strong support networks.
And the center of that was the Catholic Church.
It was everything. The local church, the parish. It wasn't just for Sunday Mass. It was the social hub. It was where you'd go to connect with people from your home county in Ireland, to get help, to feel like you belong somewhere.
The priests were community leaders then.
Absolutely. They'd help you find a job, maybe a place to live. They were the bridge between the immigrant community and the city power structure.
And the church also focused on education, building their own schools.
A huge priority. Parochial schools. It was also about preserving their Catholic faith and their cultural identity in a country that was mostly Protestant and often hostile to them.
And beyond the church, they brought their culture with them, the music.
The music, yes. The fiddle, the tin whistle, all of those folk songs traveled with them.
And what's so fascinating is how that music blended in America. You can draw a direct line from those Irish folk tunes mixing with other traditions to the birth of American genres like bluegrass and country music.
It's woven right into the fabric of American culture. And you see it with St. Patrick's Day, too. It went from a small religious day in Ireland to this massive global celebration of Irishness everywhere.
That community strength wasn't just cultural, it was financial, too. Let's talk about remittances.
Yes, this is a crucial concept. Remittances were the small amounts of money that immigrants, at great personal sacrifice, would send back home to their families in Ireland.
And this wasn't just a nice gesture, this was a lifeline.
A total lifeline. That money paid the rent to the landlords for the family that stayed behind. And very importantly, it paid for the boat tickets for younger brothers and sisters to come over.
The sheer amount of money must have been huge.
Millions and millions of pounds flowed back across the Atlantic. But here's an interesting question to think about. Did that system, in a way, just prop up the broken system back home? Did it turn the Irish family into an economic pipeline that actually kept the landlords in business?
That's a tough question, because it saved families, but it also sustained the very system they were fleeing.
Exactly. But that financial strength translated into political power in their new homes. As their numbers grew in cities like Boston and New York, they started to organize.
Into these powerful voting blocks.
Powerful, coordinated voting blocks. And they used that power to get a foothold in city jobs, public service jobs. That's why you see this long tradition of Irish Americans in the police and fire departments.
They went from manual labor to stable, respected city jobs.
And it didn't stop there. That organization propelled them into local, state, and eventually national politics. They really shaped the course of American labor rights and political life.
And we should quickly mention this wasn't just a North American story. It went all the way to Australia.
It absolutely did. Thousands went to Australia. Some as convicts originally, but later many more came as free settlers, looking for land or joining the gold rush. They were fundamental to building Australia's farming industry.
So when you add it all up, what's the scale of this today?
The numbers are just staggering. The global Irish diaspora is estimated to be around 70 million people.
70 million. And Ireland's population today is what, about 5 million?
Around 5 million. So the diaspora is many, many times larger than the homeland. It's just an incredible testament to resilience.
It really shows how migration, even when it's born from tragedy, can completely redraw the map of the world.
So the question to leave you with is this. When a people survives a catastrophe by scattering across the globe, does their new home benefit from the trauma of their old one? Something to think about.
Absolutely. Good luck with your studies.